Hi everyone, welcome back to Misinformation in Science and Society. Here to listen, not to judge. I'm your host Annie, and today with us we have Doug Lombardi. All right, so welcome. Could you please introduce yourself a little bit and what you do?
Hi, I'm Doug Lombardi. I'm a professor at the University of Maryland in the Human Development Department, and just recently I took on a new role as the Associate Dean for Faculty Affairs in the College of Education.
Yeah. So, why did you choose this career path initially?
Yeah, I've had a lot of. I'm older and I'm relatively new to the academy, given my age. At the university level, I did other things. I was in the military for a while. I forecasted weather when I was in the military, and then I worked at a major federal laboratory after that. After I got out of the military, and did some science-related work and environmental impact assessment. And I decided that, I just wanted to do something more with teaching, more with learning, and then decided to switch careers into education. I became a high school science teacher, and I've worked for a NASA mission as their education and public outreach manager. And then over the past about 15 years, I've been involved in the research enterprise in psychology, educational psychology, and so it's just been something I've always been interested in, and how people learn, how people think, how people reason about, particularly about science and scientific topics.
Yeah. And what's like your favorite part of doing what you do now?
The research is really the thing that I would really like to do the best, and especially research that has application and impact, particularly within classroom contexts. So that's where we focus. I get the opportunity to work with really some amazing people, students, other faculty. It's really great to kind of collaborate and share and think about these really important problems and challenges that we face, and the opportunities for kind of advancing humans and helping us to get better as a society.
Mm-hmm. So why do you think that truth and correct information in our society and also in science and like every field is like so important, and why do you think misinformation is such a big issue right now?
Yeah. So that there's a lot of questions there. Let's see if I can remember all of them. The truth is a really interesting kind of concept from philosophy, and we deal with it kind of a constructive way when we think about how science knowledge is constructed and how people engage with science and think about science. And this has kind of led us into notions of science denial, and then into thinking about misinformation and disinformation. And in particular, we look at the research team that I work with. We look at kind of notions of how people make judgments about the truthfulness of explanations, particularly scientific explanations. And we do that when they think about how they judge the truthfulness of scientific explanations when they're presented with an alternative that may not be a scientific consensus. So the classic example there is the climate crisis. And what we looked at early on was the causes of climate change. And, a common notion about a decade ago, 10 years ago, was that, you know, the climate may be changing because the sun is putting out more energy. And that may be the reason temperatures are rising around the globe, the reason ice is melting. That turned out to be a non-scientific consensus alternative. The scientific consensus says that humans are causing climate change through their activities, such as emitting uh, carbon, which is a greenhouse gas that in fact enhances the greenhouse effect. So, kind of how you make judgments about which is the more truthful explanation. This links to evidence and our judgments about evidence, and this is where we get a lot into kind of this idea about information, disinformation, and science denial. is involved in both kind of thinking about, hey, what are the sources of information and what are the claims that people are making and how do we judge the truthfulness of those claims? So I hope that kind of answered your question.
Hmm. Yeah. And so how do you or people like in your field then try to like tackle or avoid the misinformation?
Yeah, I mean, so we talk a lot about kind of these different ways to come at the problem. So should we deal with it? Are there societal kind of like a top-down approach? Can like government take better action? Can tech companies take better action to protect people? And then kind of a bottom-up approach is thinking about, what can people do individually, or what can they do collectively together in groups to to protect themselves against, possibly harmful misinformation or disinformation. And it's really important for me in particular because disinformation is this nefarious form of information. So, you know, it's common for people to say things that are wrong and think that they're true. I mean, I do it all the time. Everybody does it. And so we might, given our increase in our technology to spread information around, we may spread misinformation. But disinformation is when people purposefully try to mislead, and they do that for purposes of profit. They do that for purposes of gaining power. And these are all generally purposes that they've got. They know they're lying, and they know that they're putting out false information on purpose. And this can then be spread as misinformation. So, we think about it in terms of a classroom context, how to develop students, how to deepen their critical thinking skills and their scientific thinking skills when they're thinking about information sources and when they're thinking about claims, particularly when there's alternative claims that may not be scientific or may not be, like the expert consensus. When you think about things, social justice issues, when you think about history and what historical claims are and what historians believe versus what other people are putting out there. So we kind of deal with that and can do it at a personal level to kind of help students think about ways to, given this that we're got all this information coming in, how do we then deal with it? So that's kind of what we do in a big broad sense, and I can give you more details about specifically what we do in our classroom context.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I was just gonna ask. How like you've done like work in like teaching students how to like evaluate and understand like scientific information. Like, can you share a little bit about like those skills of why they're like so important in today's society?
Yeah, well, they're really important to today's society because, we're increasingly more complex and technological, and it's great because we've got all this information at our fingertips. But there's a problem with that too, right? So there's good sides and there's some potential ways that they can cause harm. So what we've been working on over the past more than a decade now is develop kind of these what we call instructional scaffolds, or instructional tools for students to use, for teachers and students to use, to help them do kind of more of these complex kind of evaluations of the connections between scientific evidence and alternative claims. And uh, and this kind of eases that for them, but then also helps them kind of learn how this process works in the real way that scientists do it. So we look at topics that are socially relevant, that are mainly scientific, like the climate crisis, like availability of freshwater resources. We look at fossil fuel use and what implications are. And we compare like these common alternatives that may not be scientific um, with the scientific explanations. What we were able to do is through these scaffolds, these tools that students use, they're able to um, they're able to be autonomous. We don't tell them what the correct answer is, right? So then they make these connections, these judgments about how well these evidence connect with these various claims, and we're able to shift them towards a more scientific stance. And it's really been great. We work with teachers, we work with students, thousands of students, hundreds and hundreds of teachers in different parts of the country. And it works in rural environments, urban environments. It works in regular suburban classrooms. It works with middle school students and high school students. So lately, what we've been working on is then connecting these source evaluation techniques with some people that are really smart in this process called lateral reading, and that's kind of what expert fact checkers do. And what they do is a really efficient way to kind of fact check information on the internet. Instead of reading carefully through like one website or one tweet or posting, you kind of open up multiple web tabs and you quickly cross-check and you start making judgments about the reliability of the source. And that's how trustworthy the source is, how often they are wrong, how often they're right. And these things are all available, and you can kind of cross-check and see if that information source is making a certain evidence suggestion, what the credibility of that source is. It's really cool. So we're working in social studies classrooms now, we're working in science classrooms, and we're all generally around these topics of social relevance, and they generally have a scientific slant to them. It's really great.
Mm-hmm. And what are your thoughts on like incorporating current events or news topics in like the science curriculum as a way to like teach students about scientific credibility and misinformation?
Yeah, we do that. I mean, it's great. I think that's really what you want to do. And the idea here is that not only do we get students to kind of when they deal with these current topics, like so we dealt with things like fresh water in urban settings, just making sure people have access to fresh water resources. We deal with like the latest information technologies and how to make decisions about them and things like that. What we find is students are really interested in learning about this, and they can make more scientific judgments, they can make more truthful estimates of what really is something the consensus believes, the expert consensus. And they learn a lot, just some basic scientific stuff. And that's without having to spend, periods and periods of lecture, right? So this gets students to really engage, think about the details, the knowledge information that of course, in high school settings or middle school settings, even college settings, we want students to do this so they can do well on tests and achievement, get good grades and all that kind of stuff. So it turns out that we can do both. We can make a more autonomous environment, give the control of students by making these facts current, making it relevant, making it authentic to their situations. So students really care. Students really want to do well in their communities. They want to help their communities, and they're really eager to learn how to do that better. So they already know a lot, right? They already know a lot coming to middle school and high school, but they want to do better, and it's just really great to kind of throw some of that control to them in this learning situation. It's really cool.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing that. And those are actually all my questions about misinformation. I have two more questions just like for fun, but do you have anything else to add about misinformation before I ask those?
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add is, the reason I do this, what really drives me is, fundamentally believe in a democratic process. And I do that because I think that really helps equality. I think it makes people more equal. I think it helps people get more opportunities. It helps people kind of achieve and thrive the way that they want to. And what people that are purposely putting out misinformation, the disinformation peddlers is what I call them, is they're trying to stop that process. They're trying to stop that democratic process. They're trying to disengage people. They're trying to disempower people. And these common like power structures, like men over women or white over black or old over young, these are anti-democratic processes. And so that's really, to me, this is really important. It really is important to democracies, not only in the United States, but throughout the world. It's important to our environment, um, that we're a part of as humans. So there's some really important issues for us to think about, and so we want to be better at thinking about information.
Hmm. For sure. And yeah, so what inspires you in life? Like inspirations, like that's like a person, idea, book, etc.
Yeah, I think about a lot about kind of when you have these like adverse situations, when you're under some kind of oppression or some kind of crisis or challenge, or so those are the kind of things that inspire me, is the courage that people show. And even though they're suffering a lot of hardship or even oppression, the courage people show. So those are the kind of things that inspire me, and that's kind of what makes democracy is such a great thing. And that's kind of what I kind of keep in mind. Kind of philosophically, what drives us. We've got these psychological theories, we've got these sociological theories that are really important to us. It all kind of comes down to this notion of, when we think about science, knowledge construction, how we learn about science, when we think about science, denial, it all comes back to this work that was done in kind of a democracy format of what science really is in that democratic enterprise. And this is classical pragmatism. And the idea there is that, the best solutions are the ones that help benefit communities the best. So these are kind of the folks that inspired me, the philosophers that have done this over the years. And traditionally those have been white males, but um, I do read a lot of science fiction, and I read a lot of really cool fiction now. N.K. Jameson, she's really great. She's one of my favorite authors, and I look to people that have pushed courage and pushed and despite being scared or fearful, really trying to do the best that they can and overcoming that through courage.
Yeah, for sure. And do you have any like advice for people, especially teens? It can just be like general advice or anything.
Yeah, I guess I've made a lot of mistakes in my life, but I've had a lot of great opportunities myself. Um, and even though you fail at something, it always seems to be a good part of that you can take, and you can either persist and get better at what you're doing, or you can learn that this just isn't the right thing for you to do and then do something else. But always kind of seeking that better self, and what betters yourself and what betters your community, are really kind of what I've kind of learned over all these years of working in all these different areas and working with some really terrific people that have inspired me and helped me along the way. So I would just say, just know that things are not going to necessarily come easy all the time, but that process and that journey is really the way to go. And working with people and collaborating with people and helping people learning together is really the best thing.
All right. Thank you for that, and thank you for this entire interview. That's all I have, and yeah, thank you for your time and insights. Really, it was really nice talking to you.
Well, it's my pleasure, and so you're welcome. But I just want to say thank you for doing this. This is really a really nice opportunity.
Thank you so much. All
Have
right, take care.